welcome to the Vin Armani Show. We are streaming live on YouTube at youtube.com/Vin Armani. Also on Twitter and Periscope at Vin Armani is my handle there. And we are also streaming live on the Facebook page of our content partner, Activist Post. That's facebook.com/Activist Post. Man, we've got a good show for you today. We've got an interview doubleheader. We've got two guests, and they are two heavyweights. Our guest in the second hour is Roger Ver, of course, the controversial CEO of Bitcoin.com, as well as an investor in many of the most important cryptocurrency startups. He is coming on. We are going to talk about the past, present, and future of Bitcoin. Very excited to have on the man that they call the Bitcoin Jesus. And in the first hour, yet another person who has been called a messiah of the movement as well. We have Adam Kokesh, friend of the show. He's going to come on. We're going to talk about what he's seeing as he travels around the country on a very long multi-stop tour, the Taxation is Theft tour. We're going to talk about his run for U.S. president that he's planning in 2020 and how he's seeing that shape up as it relates to him meeting all of these people around the U.S. So in addition to that, although those are going to take up quite a bit of the show, we've got some great stories. Definitely want to talk a little cryptocurrency, as we always do, and we've got a story that is about the legal ramifications that could be coming with cryptocurrency trading. It's something that we've talked about before. We've got a very interesting story on that. In addition to that, I want to talk a little bit about AI. We're going to talk about self-ownership. We're going to talk about, as we usually get around to doing, principles and preferences and why it's so important to know the difference between the two. So to help us out with all of that, as always, my good friend, co-host, and producer, Mr. Christian Reyes. Christian.
Thank you, Van.
Good morning, dude.
Good morning.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, it's been a crazy week again.
And it's been a crazy morning. Just before we get into this, I just want to, sometimes I do the Vinstradamus thing where I predict things,
right,
and it's like whatever, and it's interesting. Sometimes I really don't want to be right.
Yeah.
Back in March, and we've played the clip a few times since then. Back in March, apropos of nothing, I said, in September, we're going to war with North Korea.
Yep, I remember that too. You said that, and then on my Facebook, we met up later that day on my Facebook page. Scrolling on my feed, I saw that post, and I was like, "What?"
And that was March.
Yeah,
that was March. And it's not like I said, "Oh, war with North Korea is coming," anything like that. I said September.
You called that on the show too, right?
Of course I did. Yeah, and we've played clips from it. This is back in March,
dude.
Today is the 4th of September. This morning in the UN Security Council, Nikki Haley, why don't you just go ahead and play this Haley thing?
To the members of the Security Council, I must say, enough is enough. We have taken an incremental approach, and despite the best of intentions, it has not worked. Members of this council will no doubt urge negotiations and a return to talks. But as I've just outlined, we have engaged in numerous direct and multilateral talks with the North Korean regime, and time after time, they have not worked. The time for half measures in the Security Council is over. The time has come to exhaust all of our diplomatic means before it's too late. We must now adopt the strongest possible measures. Kim Jong-un's action cannot be seen as defensive. He wants to be acknowledged as a nuclear power. But being a nuclear power is not about using those terrible weapons to threaten others. Nuclear powers understand their responsibilities. Kim Jong-un shows no such understanding. His abusive use of missiles and his nuclear threats show that he is begging for war. War is never something the United States wants. We don't want it now. But our country's patience is not unlimited.
I mean, that sounds like straight out of 300, dude. That sounds like the beginning of 300. Christian, this is pretty much it. We know what those words are. We've heard these words before. We know what this means. I don't think that there's any sort of a mystery about it. We're gonna watch this as it happens, dude. But
yeah, this is crazy shit.
This is not like any war that we've seen in our lifetime, because you're dealing with like there's going to be some serious civilian casualties in developed nations. I mean, South Korea is no Iraq. You know what I mean? South Korea is no Libya. Like, people probably got a South Korean device or are wearing South Korean made or designed clothes, or you know what I'm saying? It's crazy. We're gonna watch it. Yeah. We're gonna watch it. I don't want to do war porn, but yet again, all I want to say is that what's important in this story, at least for me, or what I would like to give to people out of this, is there's a reason why I was able to pick way back in March, not just that it would happen, but that it would be now. And I've laid that out. I really hope people will go back and check out the Ascendant Project, which is a video series I did last year that is about the cycle that we're in. It's very important that people understand this is a cycle. This is a cycle that we're moving through. You can't stop it. It's unstoppable. The wheel big wheel keeps on turning. You know what I mean? This is the big wheel turning. You can get out in front of it, though. And I'm going to try to give people as many tools as they can to get out in front of it. One tool, right here.
There you go.
Self-ownership, right? The book. People can go and get this. We are on the 3rd printing now. We are through 2 printings of this thing. Thank you to everybody who has purchased both the hard copy, and now we're on 2 printings of the hard copy. That's not to say all the people who have ordered the digital copy, which is the audiobook read by John Loth.
Which is amazing.
Which is great, right? It's
like God talking to you.
The PDF, the ebook. So please, this and we'll talk a little bit more about this, but what's important in here is that I'm trying to lay out a framework whereby if you see the world through this lens, you start to understand better what's going on, and you enable yourself to make the right choice.
Right.
And the right choice is not with the state. Never has been, never will. Well, maybe it has at some point in the past, but certainly not in our lifetime. And so only available via selling it with cryptocurrency. And you notice I wore a Christian Ray's printed shirt today that you created, right? The Activist Post shirt.
Yep.
Take that self-ownership off so they can see. Yeah, cool. There you go. The White Rabbit. People have probably seen this being worn by other people in the movement because they've gotten it from us. You're wearing a shirt, if they could see, Crypto Savage. Those are going on sale soon for cryptocurrency, right?
They're on Govern Yourself.
There we go. So I'm going to put the link to that in the show description, governyourself.com, for cryptocurrency.
Yeah.
Go and buy them. These are coming, bro.
Oh, shit.
Got it worked out with the distillery. So, Christian, we've been doing these just for VIPs, right? High dollar, very high dollar for VIPs here in Vegas. We figured out how we can be compliant with the craft distillery laws, sell these for cryptocurrency, and send them to the people. How good is this vodka, bro?
Amazing. Dude.
Small batch, Nevada wheat and blue corn, never been done before. Small batches done right over here, Las Vegas Distillery.
2 doors down, 3 doors down.
Handcrafted. And so not only we're going to start with this, but then we have a whole other idea that you came up with, and I think that we're going to do some Crypto Savage, almost like a Crypto Savage custom line.
Yeah, dude.
Right? And we can do any of the things that Las Vegas Distillery does. So what are we talking about? We're talking about bourbon, 3 different kinds of vodka, moonshine, including an apple pie moonshine, which is like, what? And now they have an age. I don't know if you've seen this. They aged some of the apple pie moonshine.
Oh, no, I haven't seen that yet.
It tastes like sherry.
Whoa.
They aged it for 2 years in barrels, and it tastes like sherry.
Oh, shit.
Aged apple pie moonshine.
And George's Las Vegas Distillery, their spirits are like the best.
Oh yeah, legit,
Hands
bro.
down.
Legit. So I can't wait to offer that to people. Look, dude, this is going to be the first. Now, what's awesome is because we never distributed this vodka through distributor, and we only ever went boutique bottle to VIPs. This is going to be the first ever vodka sold exclusively for cryptocurrency.
Sick.
And the colors are black and gold.
Right.
Our colors. And it's printed. What's awesome about it is sold for cryptocurrency. The printing, 24 karat gold. This is a 24 karat gold foil on it.
That bottle's ridiculous.
And every bottle is going to be personalized. So Christian's going to run it through the The etcher,
Yeah.
we'll put your name on it. We'll put your logo on it if you want, and ship it out. So
Awesome.
I'm stoked, bro. It's all
Me too.
coming together.
Yeah.
A lot of things in the works. So we're gonna go to Kokesh at we're gonna go to Kokesh in 5. But before we do that, I do want to say this. This coming week, this next weekend, Free Coast Festival. Just want to talk about it a little bit. I'm going to be up in New Hampshire. If you're on the East Coast, especially if you're in the Northeast, or even if you're in like the Midwest, it's a cheap flight over. Fly to Manchester, fly to Boston. Come in September 8th through the 10th. Beautiful Portsmouth, New Hampshire, right on the seacoast. This is Free Coast Fest 2017. You go to festival.freecoast.org to get your tickets. There's going to be a Friday night party. Saturday, there's a speaker series at the Old Stone Church, which is an old Puritan church that has been turned into a bar and live music venue. That's super cool. I'm going to be speaking there along with some other fantastic speakers. This particular event and the people in what they call the Free Coast, the Seacoast region, it's heavily about voluntaryism. It's heavily about agorism. This is the more sort of technological side of it. This is where Matt Carano of Swarm City is based. The Swarm City guys will be there. This is an opportunity for crypto savages who are like myself, who are maybe a little more on the tech side and who love that, to really engage with other people who are living this every single day. And Portsmouth is absolutely gorgeous. So I can't wait to be there. I'd love to see you guys there. Festival.freecoast.org, and I'm sure we'll have some swag to give to you and whatnot. So we've got that. Christian, let's jump into this first news story because it's something maybe we could talk a little bit with Kokesh about. So there are laws that are coming into place in terms of legislation when it comes to cryptocurrency, and there's a story here that is a cautionary tale. And it's a tale about more than just cryptocurrency, but it's a tale for agorists as you move through this process. One of the things that I've always said is if you're going to be an agorist, you need to know the law better than the person who's going to be enforcing any law against you. This is the reason why, talking about how can we make sure that we are compliant with this law, with the craft distillery law, which luckily was actually written by this distiller. He was the first ever craft distiller in Nevada. How do you work, I don't want to say necessarily within the law, but how do you take advantage of all the freedoms that you have that are not written into the law? And this is a cautionary tale. We're going to talk with Kokesh about this because he is someone who is not afraid to lay it out on the line legally. So let's throw this up. This is guilty here. This is from Coinivore. Bitcoin trader heads to prison despite being legally compliant. And maybe if you want to get Kokesh while I'm doing this story. Libertarian Randall Lord shares lessons learned in his Bitcoin case and vows to fight criminalization of crypto trading as he heads to prison despite not committing a crime. Lord said he took steps to make sure he was legally compliant and tried to register with FinCEN, Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, as he was instructed by the exchange he was purchasing BTC from. However, that registration didn't go through according to the exchange, so he tried to register again. Quote, "This time for whatever reason it got saved and they sent me a registration number and I thought everything was fine," Lord said. At the same time, his business was legal since Bitcoin isn't classified as a currency since it's not issued by the government. But at the federal level is where he ran into problems. Yet the state still illegally prosecuted him, absent of any law regulating Bitcoin. Lord then pleaded guilty to running an unlicensed money service business. He contacted the Office of Financial Institutions and asked them if he had to have a state license, and they said he was correct that, quote, "Bitcoin isn't a currency and it doesn't meet the statute, therefore it's not regulated under the license." Lord then tried to withdraw his plea and was denied by the courts, citing that it would be, quote, "inconvenient to the court to go to trial with the matter." The judge then gave Lord the harshest maximum sentence he could to make an example out of him. Quote, "Anytime you allow a federal government or a government to redefine the terms and meanings of the words in their contract, then you allow that government to have unlimited power, and that's what happened here," Lord said. Christian, if you want to pop over, we can wait for him to connect.
He picked up, but the internet connection was not good.
Oh, all good, dude. So basically, here's what happened. Here's this guy. This guy's trading Bitcoin.
Yeah.
He finds out, okay, I have to file this money service business filing, right? It's a 2-page document. I've talked about it a lot. We've put it into counter markets,
yeah.
right? I think 2 issues ago. You have to file this with FinCEN, with the feds. So he did. But one of the things about this law says they can still prosecute you if you are in violation of state law. So they come to him, they file charges against him and arrest him, take him to court, he's arraigned. He pleads guilty to basically not being in compliance with the state. After he pleads guilty, then he goes and contacts the state and he finds out, oh, actually, I was compliant. There's no law about Bitcoin in my particular state. He goes to withdraw his plea. The judge says, you can't withdraw your plea, and gives him the maximum sentence.
Wow.
Which is a lesson. It's a lesson
Absolutely.
about if you're going to be involved in something, know the law, what rights you have, and if you think that you are compliant with that, don't plead guilty.
Seriously.
And maybe this is something that we can talk about with somebody who knows his way around the law when it comes to activism and who's put himself on the line quite a few times. Our first guest of the day, Mr. Adam Kokesh. Adam Kokesh is an author, speaker, media personality, and activist. He's a former veteran who came to public prominence for his strong anti-war stance and activism. He's currently on a tour of the United States, sharing his platform in preparation for a run for the President of the United States in 2020. Adam Kokesh, welcome back to the Vin Armani Show.
Hey, thank you so much, Vin. Although I have to say, it is still more accurate to point out that I am running for not president because the platform is the peaceful, orderly dissolution of the entire United States federal government, and I will be doing only one thing as president, which is signing the executive order in which I resign and initiate the administrative process of doing that whole dissolution thing.
Okay, so we'll talk about that. I just wonder if you could, just quickly, since you have been up against federal law at various different times for your activism, and because I know that we are both promoters of building the agora, and that sometimes in building that agora, the people who are enforcing the laws don't actually know the laws that they're enforcing as well as the people who are building the agora. What do you say about this story? For these people who are out there who are trading and who feel or know that they are compliant with the laws and then are brought before the court. What do you say about the idea of pleading guilty?
Oh yeah, never plead guilty. I mean, to anything. Never, like, really. It's just such a terrible strategy. It's so rare where that would even be the right thing to do, because it's like saying, government, please screw me. Let me just turn around and bend over for you. Like, give me your worst. And when you understand government is having to operate and maintain a consensus in order to exist, you understand why the technicalitarian arguments, like Mark Stevens' brilliant angle of, you don't have jurisdiction over me, or I'm a sovereign citizen. The only reason they work is because you're making yourself more of a pain in the butt than you're worth. And when you understand that dynamic, you understand that you can make yourself a pain in the butt very easily for a lot of these things and make it a lot more difficult for government to screw you. And I think that's a much better approach. You have to, and this is where, I feel sorry for a lot of these guys, because not everybody in the Bitcoin space is a libertarian. Not everybody understands government as much as they're working so awesomely to help, dissolve the federal government's money monopoly through the Fed system. But a lot of them don't understand the nature of government itself, and so when they go into these difficult situations, they think, well, government, I mean, it's obsolete and it's silly, but it's made up of good people, and they're here to protect me. And so, of course, if I just do the right, honest thing and take it, straightforward approach, it's like, no, sorry, that's not how it works.
Okay. So that out of the way. Thank you for that, by the way, because I think more people need to hear it, and I think that we're moving into a space where that's going to be an important message for us to keep saying. Let's talk about this tour, man. Yes, please. The floor is yours.
Just a little picture, because I have a friend, Morpheus, Thomas Costanzo in Phoenix, who got rolled up a few months ago for operating an unlicensed money transmitting business. And it's just how they're coming after the Bitcoin community through the day traders, through the guys who go out and, you know, hustle on the streets and are doing localbitcoins.com. That was his main gig. You know, he was helping people in Phoenix get into Bitcoin. He was an awesome evangelist. And, you know, those are who they've been able to sort of snipe out. And they're not even doing a great job of that. So ultimately, you know, protect yourself, enjoy this great dance forward that humanity is engaged in, because Bitcoin and cryptocurrency are a critical part of that.
I love it. Thank you. Let's talk about, well, you talked about Phoenix. You have friends all over, and I think we're clearly seeing that with your tour. You've been out there for a few weeks, more than a few weeks, man. Are you tired? Are you tired yet? Tell us about the tour. Tell us about the tour.
No, it's weird, because like I think of myself as an introvert, and then I go on the road and it's like, oh my gosh, I love meeting people, I love talking to people, you know, like everywhere we go. And it's energizing. It really is energizing, and it's not in two ways. Because like ultimately, I really am an introvert. I'm a nerd. I want to sit at home. I want to be behind my computer and read books and build earthships and things like that. But when I get out on the road, I meet our people. And to meet our people in person instead of just online is so different. I mean, getting through the distortions of social media, that lens, being able to see people directly, face to face. I'm a hugger. You know, I get to hug everybody, and not everybody, but everybody who's willing, right? Consensual hugging only. But meeting these people in person, being able to feel that love that's behind this movement, meeting people who you've seen online even coming to life, and feeling their passion in a more direct way, getting in front of an audience, even a small one, and being able to connect with people and make people laugh and inspire and motivate people is awesome. But the second thing is just talking to regular people, you know, and I do this all the time anyway, but especially on the road, you know, traveling with the Freedommobile with the big logos all over it. You know, we've been talking to a lot of mechanics because we've been in the shop a lot on this tour, but we talk to people at gas stations, at grocery stores, everywhere that politicians like to hang out in their cliche stories. And when people at the gas stations, this happens every time we stop for gas, someone sees the big freedom logos on the rig and they say, what's freedom? And I saw it's this book I started writing when I was in jail for civil disobedience. It's about how we create a more peaceful, harmonious, and productive world by dissolving government entirely. And most of them go, yeah, sounds like a good idea. And, you know, we have this false misconception that our message won't be received well, or that people won't like us for talking politics and religion. This is anti-politics, you know, and if you talk anti-politics of sharing love and joy and passion for what's important for you, you do it in a compassionate, joyous way, no one really objects to that. And if they do, it's okay, you know, you love them anyway and let them get their therapy so that they can give up their attachment to state violence later. And then people say, well, what are you doing about it? I'm getting ready to run for president in 2020 on the platform of dissolving the entire federal government. They go, yeah, I could support that. Sounds like a good first step. You know, I mean, it's amazing. People are ready for this. You know, you look at marijuana legalization, how public opinion was for it like way before the policy changed, and still, you know, if you look at the numbers now, it's absurd how far ahead it is, even in places where it's, I know there's still places in America where weed's illegal, then I'm sorry, not everybody gets to live in Nevada. But they've, you know, we're like dragging government along with the leash of democracy to be more in line with public opinion, or as I might say, what a voluntary market would provide. And I hope there's like really sharp spikes on the choke chain on the other end of this collar. I don't know if it works that way. But when it comes to decentralizing government, this is the new libertarian strategy. It's not about taking over a territory and imposing libertarian policy on everyone. It's about respecting the right of self-determination of communities and of individuals and getting government decentralized. And so dissolving the federal government at this point is actually a really obvious solution that's finally one as big as the problem. And by and large, the American people are ready for this. You know, there's not going to be some big showdown. There's not going to be like some, you know, crazy blood in the streets kind of fight, or, you know, the state's going to end with a whimper and a yawn. And this first step of decentralization of these big modern bureaucratic governments is a really exciting step. But it could be really easy. It could be we win the nomination in 2020 and we get on the debate stage and people go, yeah, Adam's right. We'd be better off without the federal government. America is too good for this thing.
Well, I wanted to ask you that something this week. Speaking of the bureaucracy, the overall bureaucracy of government, it's something that I don't think we've talked about, but I know you certainly must have thought about it in this regard. So this week, obviously, we have this ramp up with North Korea that we're seeing even more today. Things getting to a relatively critical, what looks like it could be a critical place. We've got some weird stuff happening with Russia, them shutting down the embassy, some of the embassies, including the oldest one in San Francisco, which is very strange in terms of diplomatic ties. What does international diplomacy look like? How do those relationships shake out in a Kokesh not presidency? What happens to the embassies? What happens to the troops? What happens in that regard?
Well, first, I want to reiterate a line I half stole from my friend Zach Foster here about North Korea, that for the United States government to start a war with North Korea is the equivalent of a bully beating up a special needs kid because he told a your mama joke, just to put that in perspective. And when you ask that bigger question about international relations, the easy answer is we should relate to people peacefully and in commerce and in trade and in love and compassion and connectedness, not with government. So you get government out of the way. The peoples of nations are much better able to connect with each other and relate with peace rather than with war or with government, which is, of course, always backed up with the threat of violence. So the question, though, what happens, and it's not really so much what happens in Adam's ideal society, because my ideal society is, if you like your government, you can keep it at the community level. Just don't force it on anybody else. Get government decentralized down in the United States by dissolving the federal government, dissolving state government, so you get it down to the counties. And at that point, when anybody can secede or start their own city, state, or community on private property, we're done. Libertarians get to retire. We don't really have to worry about anything at that point, as our message is kind of irrelevant, right? When government is so localized that it's essentially all voluntary and you can opt out on your own private property, there are no more battles to be won, essentially. We've won the war against big centralized government. So to answer the specifics of your question, it's really more about the transition that I'm advocating for. And it's really simple, bring everybody home, sell the property, liquidate the assets, and use the funds of that to fund, as you spin off the VA and, maybe a couple other federal agencies that are, providing legitimate services that should be preserved as discrete institutions. And then you use the rest of the money for funding Social Security until it runs out. But what do you do with the military itself? Most of it's going to be liquidated. Certainly all of the foreign property assets will be liquidated. And then for those domestic ones, there will be an opportunity for the state governments to claim some form of their share of defense resources as would be appropriate for defense. Nuclear arsenal has to be immediately de-weaponized and turn to some non-military, non-weaponized purpose, whether that's through some kind of public trust system or through privatization. We're going to figure out the details of that. But right now I'm really excited that for our executive order to make this happen, we already have a legal team and a policy team lined up that are getting started on how we would actually craft this document and describe in binding legal terms from start to finish how to dissolve the entire federal government.
Excellent, excellent. So I know that there are people who have many, many more questions about this, and I know that you're available to answer those, especially on the tour, and that you encourage people to get further involved. How many dates left do you have? Can you give us some idea of the map of where you've traveled and where you're traveling to, and how do people find out and get involved?
Yeah, it's still somewhere like, well, if you count the volunteer meetings, we've got 70-something events still. And what we've done, I'll see if I can do this in reverse so it makes sense on your screen. We started in Arizona, we went to Vegas, and we went up the West Coast and to Seattle and Boise, Salt Lake, Billings, Sioux Falls, Minneapolis. Anyway, we come through northern Midwest, and now we're in Chicago. We're going south to St. Louis and back up through the rest of the northern Midwest through Ohio, and then we go up to northern New England. We come down Florida, we do a little loopy in the south, and then come back around through Texas and home, ending up at Ernie Hancock's place in Phoenix, Arizona on November 18th.
So there's still quite a few dates left, and certainly all the East Coast people can check you out. You have something tonight, no?
Yes, tonight we have a volunteer meeting in St. Louis.
Okay, so you're in St. Louis, and then is that the next location for the actual like proper tour? So St. Louis, those people who are in Missouri, St. Louis is the place to go. Was there anything that you wanted to end off with? Any message that you would like people to be keeping in mind as we move forward, and certainly as you move forward on this tour?
Well, I think it's a great reminder, as much as we can get, as as anarchists, and of course I'm a voluntarist, not and have always got to define terms, right? But for your audience in particular, I just want to reiterate what I think is the most important shift that I've gone through in my activism, which is based on understanding that this is not a political movement, this is an anti-political movement, and our job is not to argue with people or debate people, it's to win converts, free minds, and change how people think. And we do this with love and compassion and sharing our joy with what's important to us, not by being in any kind of verbal confrontation. But when you get to share this message from that position, not only is it more enjoyable as a process, but you get to immediately make people's lives better by sharing awesome ideas with them. And so I would just encourage people to remember that even though libertarianism describes something very precise, in voluntaryism, the non-aggression principle, self-ownership, that philosophical point right there, I think there's an inherent implication of love behind that for those of us who care about doing something about it. And I think if you stay in that love, you'll end up with a lot more freedom.
I love it, man. I love it. So Adam Kokesh's tour, you can check it out, thefreedomline.com. There are links to go from there, and I have it linked in the show description. Adam, best of luck on the tour, man, and we'll talk when you're done. We'll have you back on, and you can fill us in on everything that went right.
Excellent. Thank you so much,
brother.
Man. Hope to see you in Vegas then in a few months.
Absolutely.
And by the way,
yes,
Bundy Ranch trial's coming up. I'm a potential witness in the Pete Santilli trial, so I might be in Vegas for a while for that.
And I will come and sit in on that too. I'll come and sit in the gallery and check that out. Thank you, Adam. Thank you. All right, Christian. Very nice. It's always nice to have Adam on the show.
Yeah,
it's
cool.
Great to hear what he's doing. It's
amazing.
He's
doing a great job.
And I think that it's good that he's out there doing this now.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because look, Trump's already having rallies. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? You know that the Democrats are getting their shit together.
The timing couldn't be better for what he's doing.
Oh, people are all about it.
Yeah.
People are definitely
It's
looking for an alternative.
It's gonna be explosive.
It's good, man. It's great. So yeah, I thank Adam for coming. I'm glad that you could come on in the middle of this tour. I know sometimes it's hard. I've been on tour myself, and it's rough,
Yeah,
and you get
sure.
tired and you get sick, but man, he's a workhorse, and I know he really enjoys doing this. So dude, that's great. We've got time. I've got an important story. I think that as people have started to read and or listen to my book, and when people ask, well, what made you decide to write this book? I think we're in a very, very, very important time, especially now that we see, which is crazy, the fact that we see the rise of socialists, like literally on the street, like people who are avowed communists waving banners in the streets of the United States by the thousands, is crazy. And it's important as we now move through to understand and to expect that many of their ideals, or maybe I'll say it a different way, they didn't just pop out of nowhere, right? A movement doesn't just pop out of nowhere.
Right.
There have to be ideas and concepts that permeate through a culture over a long period of time, such that they can manifest into something like Antifa. You know what I mean? Such that they can manifest into someone like Bernie Sanders,
Right.
that people would even take socialism seriously. There have to be a lot of ideas, which is one of the reasons why my book is Self-Ownership, the Foundation of Property and Morality. That's the idea, property and morality, because property and morality are very highly linked. If you respect the private property of others, and one of those aspects of respect is certainly the bodily autonomy of others, then you're going to be a more moral person. Certainly, if you, what are the immoral things? Theft, assault, murder, rape. Well, if you look at all of them, someone who respects the private property of another person doesn't commit theft.
Right.
Someone who respects the bodily autonomy of another person, for instance, doesn't commit rape. Rape is a disrespect of the bodily autonomy and the self-ownership of another person. So is murder. So is all violence. So when you see a group of people who are punching people in the face unprovoked, hitting them with shit, burning property, smashing windows, these are immoral individuals. These are immoral acts, and they are simultaneously a disrespect of property because they go together.
Yeah.
Respect for property, moral behavior go together. Interesting story. We're going to do some artificial intelligence stories here because I think it's important. It's a topic that we love to cover. But this is story number 2. So we're coming to a time, we've talked about the robot tax. We talked about it last week. And we talked about how the problem with the robot tax is that there's this sort of assumption in the narrative that what you're doing with the robot tax is you're taxing the labor of robots. But as we discussed last week, only humans can labor because labor is related to self-ownership. Labor is the application of your thoughts and your sensations with intent, and only human beings can have intent. So, for instance, the taxation of the income tax is a tax on your labor. Now, there's a lot of problems with the income tax because it makes the assumption, the way that it's executed, the way that it's embodied, is making the assumption that the state is a partial owner of you, of yourself, that you don't have full autonomy and self-ownership, and therefore they have a claim to some of your labor. Just like if you're a partner in a business or you jointly own a house, if that house gets sold, you're entitled to whatever percentage of equity you have in that house. So if the government says, well, you owe us 20% of whatever the fruits of your labor are, your wages, they're saying, well, we own at least 20% of your body because it's your body that's doing the labor. Now, clearly, we see that's not true. But I want to go over this story because it's an example of what happens when you allow these ideas to permeate. Why last week I said, let's deal with this story of the robot tax. Because if you don't deal with it, it continues to permeate, and it morphs, and it arises in a different context. And it's all of these contexts arising is how you get these, I don't want to call them dumb, but how you get these irrational ideas arising in society. And unfortunately, this article is actually from a website and a news outlet that we actually rely on and that are allies of ours in a lot of different regards, particularly when it comes to bodily autonomy, vaccines, etc. Go ahead and throw up this sex robots. This is from Waking Times. The title is Sex Robots, the Evolution of Objectification of Women. From Waking Times. With pedophilia rings being busted almost weekly now, and the gender-bending meme playing out all over Hollywood, never mind it's being insinuated into our biology chemically without our choice, there seems to be a newfangled perversion which we are supposed to accept as, quote, normal. Never mind its psychological and social implications. The introduction of robots as sex toys that you can rape, masturbate to, or simply voice your most outlandish fantasy to, is being inserted into our psyche via a slow drip. But make no mistake, the intention is to open a deluge so that non-human sexual, quote, play is commonplace. In a society that has already objectified the human being to such a degree that women are told they deserved it when they are raped for dressing provocatively or even wearing red lipstick, and sexting among teens now includes describing forceful and violent acts of fisting, while young boys are silenced in Vatican torture chambers and used as sexual mannequins by the elite, we now have the bizarre creation of Samantha. She's an AI robot who, quote, really likes to be kissed, at least according to her maker, Sergey Santos. There is the implication that all sex with a woman should be easy and passive, that a woman should never have her own volition, sexual preferences, moods, a menstrual cycle, or have a general distaste for being objectified as purely a sexual object, that those who are most passive and fragile, children, the elderly, abused women, the mentally challenged, etc., are easy targets, like a robot, for the deviant sexual whims of a population of men who have become, by design, disassociative of guilt, shame, or moral righteousness. This also teaches people that physical desires should always be granted and that there are no consequences to overindulgence in sexual acts. This is patently untrue. Not only is the nervous system disrupted, but social connection, which causes normal human growth and interpersonal relationship, is stunted. Are robot harems helpless? Hardly. They're the next step in making human beings the slaves of AI, the next step in canceling all real-world interaction. The plan has been in the making for possibly eons, and when the sexually programmed robot becomes smart enough with the development of AI to perpetuate the same behavior on non-robot others, what do we do then? Fully autonomous killer robots have already been created. These new dolls pave the way for fully automated AI rapists. So this is Christina Sarich writing this. And so we need to deal with this, Christian. Here's the problem. The problem starts with the title. The title is Sex Robots, the Evolution of the Objectification of Women. Now, we need to deal with, first we need to, as Confucius says, the beginning of wisdom is to call things by their proper name, right? We first need to define what is objectification. The objectification of women, and what is the problem with the objectification of women? The problem with the objectification of anyone is, by definition, a synonym for objectification would be dehumanization.
Right.
To take a human being, and this is subject versus object. The subject is a living thing, right? You make it says, Jane bounces the ball. There's the subject, Jane. There's the verb, bounces. There's the object, a ball. Now, anything that can be a subject, there's a problem. That anything that can think, that has intention, that has self-ownership, the problem is that if you don't acknowledge the self-ownership of a human being, that is objectifying them. That is dehumanizing them. That is immoral. Okay?
Gotcha.
So, objectification of women would be to behave toward them as though they did not have ownership of themselves. To behave towards an individual as though they were an object to be used as you wanted, and that they had no right to either consent or dissent from what it was that you're doing. Kind of in the way that the state treats taxpayers.
Right.
That's the objectification of hundreds of millions of women.
Yeah.
Now, a robot is an inanimate object. A robot is an object.
Right.
It is not a subject. It cannot think. It cannot feel. And we're not even talking about robots at this point. We're talking about dolls, mannequins, very advanced silicon mannequins. What's really happening in this article is not the objectification, and this is where it ties into the robot tax. It's not the objectification. It's the subjectification of robots.
Robots, yeah, gotcha.
It's giving robots self-ownership, and she clearly says it in here, because, and this is how you know that this is what she at least believes on an embodied level, is she said, the introduction of robots as sex toys that you can rape, masturbate to, or simply voice your most outlandish fantasy to. You can't rape an inanimate object. You can't rape an inanimate object. Can you rape a dildo? Is that rape? You can't rape an object because an object can't either consent or dissent. The whole point of rape, the problem with rape, is that the person is not consenting and they have the capability to consent. That you are not respecting their right to consent. This is an object. This is an object. Now, this is principles over preferences. Look, sex dolls may fucking creep you out. They creep me out. The idea of a sex robot is creepy to me.
Right.
It's incredibly creepy. But does another person's... You figure, let's say there's a guy, he doesn't buy it from anybody, he doesn't do anything. He just makes one. He's very talented because somebody's making these, right? There's a guy who makes the real doll. You should only assume that the guy who manufactures the real dolls, who makes them, started making them and became good at making them because there's something about it that arouses him, right?
Right.
You've got to figure that the guy who makes the real dolls, probably the first real doll, he was probably doing some things with himself.
Yeah, he made it for himself.
Okay, so now, this guy's making these. He makes them in private. He does nothing. He tells nobody. He doesn't sell them. He's using them in private. The only human being in the room at that time is him. Mm-hmm. Is it anybody? And not only that, it's not even like porn where maybe there's even another human being on the screen who there was some act that was done. No, it's silicone and plastic and whatever the fuck it is, and he put it together, and it happens to look like a woman because he's a great artist. Like if he had chiseled it out of marble and he was sitting there like jerking it to it. But the thing is, there's no other human there. There's no other human. And that's his property. And the principle is, he can do whatever he wants to his own body. See, this is what she's missing here that's very important. If women have a right, if she's saying that women have a right to their bodily autonomy, to be able to do as they please with their body, and to only have others tell them what they can or cannot do with their bodies, if they consent, then you have to, as principle, respect that for everyone. For everyone. As a preference, it may creep you out, but that doesn't fucking matter. Not if you want others to respect your bodily autonomy.
Right.
If you want others to respect your own bodily autonomy, you have to respect the bodily autonomy of others. This also goes to free speech. If you want your free speech, if you want the ability to say the things that you prefer to say, and you don't want that trampled on, you have to respect other people saying what they want to say, even if you don't like it, even if you hate it, even if it offends you, even if it makes you squeamish to hear it.
This is a perfect example of my rights end where yours begin.
There it is. And so the other part about this that I find interesting is that to draw some sort of parallel, to say a person having sex, it's not even having sex, a person alone in a room, the only human in a room, doing a sexual act with an inanimate object somehow leads to that person being a rapist, or leads to that person being an abuser of another person.
Yeah, there's so many inconsistencies. Yeah.
But this is very, very important as we move forward, that we don't let these ideas simply slip through the cracks.
Right.
Because it's the same what justifies the robot tax and what justifies no, you can't have sex robots. To say that sex robots are somehow immoral is the only way sex robots could be immoral would be if the robot tax was moral. To make an equivalence between robots and humans, we're so far away from there. We may never get there. And artificial intelligence is used way too broadly nowadays. Right? Like the artificial intelligence that is usually talked about, we're not even there. When you think about like sentient AI, like Skynet, we're so fucking far from there. We're so far that we don't even have an idea of how to get there. The most brilliant minds have no idea of how to get there. Not even theory of how to get there. But whoever gets there first, now we're starting to have this conversation globally because it's looking like that's where countries are going to start to want to go. And because they're going there is why the conversation we're having right now is important. As we step towards this, it's important for freedom-loving people to realize if you don't want your freedom gone, the first place that you're going to lose it is not from AIs. The first place you're going to lose it is going to be from the exact place that you've always lost it, other fucking human beings using AIs as a boogeyman, including Vladimir Putin. Let's go with this Putin AI. This is Houston Chronicle. Putin, the leader in artificial intelligence, will rule the world. Russian President Vladimir Putin says that whoever reaches a breakthrough in developing artificial intelligence will come to dominate the world. Putin, speaking Friday at a meeting with students, said the development of AI raises, quote, colossal opportunities and threats that are difficult to predict now. He warned that, quote, the one who becomes the leader in this sphere will be the ruler of the world. Putin warned that, quote, it would be strongly undesirable if someone wins a monopolist position, unquote, and promised that Russia would be ready to share its know-how in artificial intelligence with other nations. The Russian leader predicted that future wars will be fought by drones and, quote, when one party's drones are destroyed by drones of another, it will have no other choice but to surrender. Christian, I very much disagree with Vladimir Putin here. I don't think that we're going to reach like that. There was this old movie, Robot Wars, where the states would go, had their mechs, and they would basically have like a UFC, a robot UFC, and whoever won would get like that piece of land. No, that's not how it's going down, dude. Like an institution that has a monopoly of violent force, two robots fighting each other is not the imposition of violent force. I don't even know why he's saying that. I don't even understand that. But what I want to say is this. What's coming and what's going to happen in terms of automation?
Automation, that's what I was thinking.
Right? Mm-hmm. The disruption that it's going to have on the world, on the economy, on governments, on people's everyday lives, the disruption that it's going to have, it doesn't require AI. Mm-mm. Like, unless you're going to call, for instance, autonomous cars AI, they're not. They're just autonomous. 90%, maybe more, but certainly in the economy, the jobs that human beings do, at least 90% could be automated.
Yeah.
You know, from serving burgers to delivering packages to bartending to, well, that's already odd. There's already a bartending robot in Vegas.
Planet Hollywood. That's crazy shit.
So these are all the serving food, like you name it. You name it. You know, there's even the creative pursuits, right? Mm-hmm. There's robots that paint. There's robots that compose music. Yep. Certainly when it comes to electronic music, already the biggest producers are so formulaic in terms of how they lay out tracks that like a lot of that work may actually already be being done with algorithms and we don't even know it. Mm-hmm. Like Milli Vanilli style when it comes to dance music, because so much of it is formulaic and it's all laid out in a way that a machine could read, analyze, and then spit back out, oh, this might
probably
work.
Already happening.
Yeah, because it's very mathematical, right? Yeah. Music is super mathematical. Yeah. So if it's not happening, it could easily occur. And news articles are being written already by what we're calling AI. But it's not. It's advanced algorithmic automation. It's not something that can write its own programs and incrementally improve itself with a utility function. That's the scary AI that Putin's talking about, that Elon Musk is talking about. But dude, this world is going to be upended before any of that shit.
The automation, that's
Now, here's the break in between. Right. And I think that I got invited up, and I don't know if he's announced the dates yet, but Jack Spirko invited me to, he does like a biannually, I don't know what it is, 2 times a year, he does a conference on his property. And so he invited me up for this one. That's cool. I think that I'm going to give 2 talks and do a panel. And I think that my first talk is going to have some relationship to this. It's that where the crypto savage sits, what we can do is, we're in the space after automation and before AI. Because right now, automation is actually accessible to the average person.
Yeah, absolutely. Even marketing softwares and stuff like that.
All of it.
Yeah.
And not just having access to it like on the consumer level, but having access to actually programming it. Like the tools, the software, all of this is there. It's a place that we should be thinking about. Instead of being scared of it, we can master it, because we may never get to the AI, but the automation is fucking here.
Oh yeah.
Big part of that is cryptocurrency, man. This is a money that can be automated by anyone, something that I'm doing in the sales of this book. Boom. You buy a book, not the book, because I got to mail that. You can't. I'm not of the skill level to automate mailing and packing yet. But Amazon is. Amazon's got robots in their warehouse. No, but if you order the audiobook and the ebook as a digital package, I don't even ever have to.
Yeah,
I've automated the process. Or if you order counter markets,
right?
We don't ever even we don't have to touch it because we wrote scripts that automated every single layer of it. There's a robot doing it. There's artificial intelligence. There's an algorithm. We can play in this space now just as normal human beings. We should be, because governments are playing in it, corporations are playing in it. Instead of complaining, we should be taking action and creating the alternative solutions ourselves.
Yep.
One of those, and one of the people who's created a lot of those solutions, one of the people who's lived by that is Roger Ver, who's our guest. So let's do this. I think that we're coming up on, yes, we are. Let's go to break. We'll come back. I will talk a little bit more about counter markets, and then we will go to our guest.
Cool.
Welcome back to the Vin Armani Show. We are streaming live on YouTube at youtube.com/Vin Armani. Also on Twitter and Periscope at Vin Armani is my handle there. And we are streaming on the Facebook page of our content partner, Activist Post. That's facebook.com/Activist Post. Before we get to our guest, I want to talk to you a little bit about counter markets. The new issue comes out tomorrow. If you have not gotten your free issue yet, this is your last chance to get your free issue for this month. My article was about Bitcoin ATMs. My article in this coming issue, for those who maybe you want to wait, get that one as your first free issue, or for the subscribers, man, we've got a great one coming up. But my article this time, I'm talking about the 5 blockchain projects that I believe will be the most disruptive in the short term to the economy, to society, to culture in general. These are all projects that are already in existence. One of them is just halfway. They're projects that we've talked about on the show, but I go into depth. So both for those people who are looking for what may be that next step for them to get involved, that next business opportunity, and also the people who are like, I'm looking for the things that I should be investing in. Although it's not investment advice, I'm telling you why these are serving to be monsters. One thing that I want to say about the project of counter markets as we've moved through it, it's been incredibly rewarding to me. And as we have developed it and as it's moved along, myself, the other contributors, our editor, Jeff Paul, we've come to see, I've gotten many, many thank yous from people saying that counter markets has made them money. But what is counter markets? What is this project? Like, why did we decide to do this, and why have we invested our time and energy in it? The key to freedom in this new coming paradigm is that nobody else is going to do it for you. We've got people on the streets, as I've said before, and basically what they're chanting is, I've got a problem, but you need to fix it. And those problems aren't going to be fixed. As a matter of fact, they're only going to be made worse. If you've got a problem, you need to fix it. But you need to know that there's a community of people out here ready to help. So if you're ready to change the world, and we change the world, we create free people by creating free markets. And if you're ready to do that, we're ready to help. And this is a step to take. So that's what I write. And that's what I put into my work every single month. That's what all the contributors put in. Valuable information. If you haven't checked it out yet, countermarkets.com, first issues free. Trends and strategies for maximum freedom. So with that, we're going to get into a very powerful discussion that we recorded just a couple of days ago with the Bitcoin Jesus, Roger Ver. Roger Ver is a former politician and Kittitian Nevisian early investor in Bitcoin-related startups. He was formerly an American citizen. He now resides in Japan. He has been a prominent supporter of Bitcoin adoption and sees Bitcoins as a means to promote economic freedom. He identifies as a libertarian, an anarcho-capitalist, peace advocate, and advocates for individualism and voluntaryism. Roger Ver, welcome to the Vin Armani Show.
Thank you. Although I think the people that put in my Wikipedia page that I'm a former politician are ones that don't like me. So I'm anything but a politician. So.
Fair enough. But I think that gets to the point of what I would like to do today, which is tell a little bit about you and to tell your story a little bit. I think people who have seen recent interviews of you or who have just gotten involved in the cryptocurrency world know you as an advocate of one side in what a lot of people are calling like the Bitcoin civil war. And there have been some contentious debates. I think in order to even understand where you're coming from and your vision, it's important to understand your story. And it is a very unique story, I think, in terms of the people who we actually know who they are in the world of Bitcoin. I think it could be argued that you are the most important thought leader and certainly the most well-known. You're often called the Bitcoin Jesus. So maybe if we could do a little gospel of Roger, as it were. Can you tell us a little bit about your vision overall, just 3,000-foot view of what Bitcoin and cryptocurrency is as you discovered it, and also what you believe that it is on the high-level view?
Yeah, so I think the road or the path that I took to get there is important. And if I had to pick a point in which it started, I would say it was probably junior high school, maybe between 7th and 8th grade, or maybe 8th grade before freshman year, and it was summertime. And my parents said, you're not allowed to play video games anymore that day or something to that effect. So I was looking for something to do, and I was looking on the bookshelf and thought maybe I'll read a book. And I came across a book on the bookshelf there called Socialism by Ludwig von Mises. And maybe a number of your readers already have heard of that book. But at the time, I had no idea who von Mises is or what this book Socialism was about. And I didn't really even fully know what socialism was or what capitalism was or any of those things, but I kind of had this vague understanding that Americans are supposed to be in favor of capitalism and against socialism. But since I didn't even really know what socialism was, I figured I should hear the other side of the argument. And so when I picked up this book that I think it was the Wall Street Journal termed as the Ludwig von Mises's devastating critique of socialism, but when I picked it up, I thought it was a pro-socialist book, to be honest. And I read the book, and the main point of the book is that without prices, you don't know what raw resources should be used to produce what consumer goods, and the prices transmit information. And without these prices and without the price mechanism, it's actually impossible for any sort of command economy to figure out what things should be built out of what other things. So it cannot work, even in theory. Socialism can't work. And then so I found the whole book really, really interesting. And that was kind of this path that set me down reading every economics book I could get my hands on. So throughout, from that time on and all through high school and after high school, I read, every single book by Ludwig von Mises. I read every single book by Murray Rothbard. I read every single book by Milton Friedman. I read every single economics book that I could get my hands on, including I read stuff by Karl Marx. I read, John Maynard Keynes' original text. I read all of Adam Smith's books. And the more I read these economics books, the more I realized that kind of everything in life revolves around economic decisions. And it really, really shaped my view of the world. The more economics I studied, the more I realized that governments are just getting in the way of the entire world's rate of economic growth, and the entire world would be a better place and a richer place, and people would have a higher standard of living if the government just got out of the way. And so I didn't start out a libertarian at all. I didn't start out an anarchist at all. It was the more economics I studied, the more I got dragged in that way. And then much, much, much later on, I started studying some of the underlying moral philosophy as well. And, some of the ideas of, John Locke and, much more contemporary people like Larkin Rose. Everybody owns themselves. You own your own body. Your own labor that you create with your body belongs to you, and what you mix your labor with that wasn't previously owned in the state of nature becomes your property, because you've mixed something that was your property with something that was previously unowned. And I became really, really persuaded by the moral arguments, and it was really, really interesting to me how what's moral and what's practical just line up and fit together just absolutely perfectly in almost every instance. And so what an interesting world where what's moral and what's practical are so intertwined. So I think the moral arguments for freedom are a little bit easier to understand at this point, but it was initially the economic arguments for freedom that brought me there. So then I wanted to tell the world about this. I wanted to tell the world, hey, more economic freedom makes everybody better off. We don't need government to control the economy, and if they do, it's going to make everybody worse off. So I ran for California State Assembly as a libertarian.
There's the politician part, right? There's
the politician part. So on my platform as a politician, I said if I were elected, I would accept no salary whatsoever, because that money would potentially come from people that maybe don't want to pay my salary. And I said I would repeal as many laws and as many taxes as I possibly could. So that was my political politician platform. No salary, because it comes from taxes, which are stolen from people against their will. And I'd repeal as many laws as I could. So, and this was back in the year 2000, which was not too long after an event that happened in Waco, Texas, where another successful government program, they locked a bunch of kids together in a church and burnt down the church in Waco, Texas, along with some of their parents. That, yeah, maybe they were a bit, religiously nutty, but even if the kids have, parents who are religious nuts, locking them in a church and burning them to death doesn't help them one bit. And so I referred to the ATF and FBI agents who murdered all these kids. And I think it was, I'd have to Google the exact number at this point, but I think it was like something like 60 kids that were under 12 years old.
That sounds right.
And it was like 100 and something people total. So like they murdered, if you're under 12 years old, think back when you were 12 years old, you follow your parents' guidance, you live with your parents, you don't have any say in it whatsoever. They burnt these kids to death. They murdered these kids. So here we are, the ATF and FBI that try to pretend that they're here to protect us and protect the children. What did they do? They burnt them to death. So any ATF and FBI agents, all the people that participated in that, you are a bunch of jackbooted thugs and murderers, and you should be ashamed for what you did there and what you're doing everywhere else as well. So I'm just here advocating voluntary interaction. You guys are the criminals there. So I said those sorts of things at a debate with the Republican and Democratic candidate at San Jose State University. It just so happened that there were some ATF agents in the audience.
Oh boy.
And yep, guess what? They, I was, I think 20 to maybe 21 years old at that point. So I'd already had some success in business, had a pretty nice car for a 20-year-old, had maybe, 6 employees or something at that point. And my business was really starting to grow. Mainly we were selling computer components. One other thing that I was selling on the side was called a Pest Control Report 2000, which is basically a firecracker used by farmers to scare birds out of their cornfield. I was selling these on eBay this was back when eBay had a guns and ammo section, and you could sell shotguns and rifles and handguns and ammunition and everything else right there on eBay. So it wasn't anything out of the abnormal. I was accepting credit card payments. I was accepting PayPal once PayPal came out. Like, I wasn't trying to hide what I was doing in any way whatsoever, because I didn't think it was illegal. If I thought it was illegal, I wouldn't have done it. Anyhow, I wound up being the only person in the entire nation to be prosecuted for selling those without a permit, even though the company that I was buying them from out of South Carolina had no permit. The manufacturer in Missouri who manufactured millions of these and sold them all over the country had no permit. And dozens and dozens of other resellers on eBay and websites, and Cabela's sporting goods catalog, right? If you're from the U.S., you've probably heard of Cabela's. They were selling them right there in their catalog as well. I wound up being the only person in the entire nation to be prosecuted for selling those. And even while I was being prosecuted, even after I signed the plea deal, other companies were still selling this exact same product with no permit. None of them wound up being prosecuted at all. What eventually happened was the manufacturer was basically told to stop selling them. None of them went to jail. None of them had any problem whatsoever. So I signed a plea deal, did 10 months in federal prison, had 3 years of federal probation. The day I was allowed to leave the country, I left. And from the time I was prosecuted until the time I left the country, I absolutely kept my mouth shut about politics. I didn't talk about the economics. I didn't talk about voluntarism. I didn't talk about any of this at all. And it wasn't until Bitcoin came along and I heard about Bitcoin and I realized that this is the tool to undermine every single government on the entire planet's ability to control people. And what a wonderful thing for economic freedom, and what a wonderful thing for personal freedom. And so I couldn't keep my mouth shut anymore. I was way too excited about it, and I had to do absolutely everything I could to tell people about Bitcoin and get as many people using Bitcoin as fast as we possibly could, because it undermines every single government on the planet's ability to control the economy. And that's retarding the entire world's rate of economic growth. So the first people, of course, I targeted with this message were the libertarians. So I started paying for advertisements on Free Talk Live, which is a libertarian radio show on more than 150 radio stations in the United States. I sent a whole bunch of Bitcoins to all of their users. I told them, post your Bitcoin address on Free Talk Live's Facebook group, and I'll send you an entire Bitcoin. And, hundreds or thousands of people did. Bitcoins were only about, $2 at the time I did that. And I'd already had, quite a bit of success from my previous business. So a lot of people claim that I'm some, schmuck who got lucky from Bitcoin. And maybe, but I had already gotten lucky lots of other times in businesses before too. So I had owned, multiple supercars before Bitcoin had ever been invented. I was basically retired, hanging out in Japan, doing Brazilian jiu-jitsu and chasing girls when I heard about
Nice.
Bitcoin. So life was pretty good before Bitcoin came along. But chasing girls and doing jiu-jitsu, that's fun and all. But how often does an opportunity as exciting as Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies come along where you have the ability to make the entire world a freer, better, happier place for every single human being on the planet? That's way more exciting than jiu-jitsu or chasing girls. So I had to jump in full time. So I took the assets that I had earned from my previous business, and I basically funded the entire first generation of Bitcoin businesses years before anybody else from Silicon Valley was investing in the space or really even paying any attention. I set up the first website to allow people to buy, hundreds of thousands of consumer electronics items for Bitcoin. It's just been all Bitcoin nonstop, all day, every day. So I made my first investment in blockchain.info when the founder of it was still living at home with his parents, and he was running the entire website on a Mac Mini out of his bedroom.
That's awesome.
So that's how far everything's come. And today, they have tens of millions of users, and it's the biggest Bitcoin wallet in the world. And so it's really exciting that I've been able to be such a key part of watching this entire ecosystem and helping this entire ecosystem develop.
Well, one thing that I want to talk about, because it's one thing that I think is very important to the current discussion and framing the current discussion. You're one of the first people who set out, and I think it's clear from what you've laid out, that how you set out to bring people into the use of Bitcoin, the adoption of Bitcoin, was as a merchant, as making goods available for sale with cryptocurrency. There are clearly you're giving them away so at that time the speculative value of these things was negligible. People weren't getting involved so that they could speculate, hoping that that the price would go up. Can you talk to us about the process, about your thinking process in terms of opening up your own business to this new currency, knowing that clearly there were some risks? I mean, you're philosophically aligned, but talk about as a business owner and as a merchant making that decision to open up your business and to try to use this at a time when the tools weren't even there yet.
So I think it actually stems back to my study of economics. So in economics, there's the theory of the origin of money, and the main one that I think is as close to accurate as can be is Mises's regression theorem, which is basically some consumer good winds up becoming money because people are using it that way, and it has to have certain properties that make it useful as money. So durable, easily divisible, easily recognizable, limited supply. There's a number of characteristics there. And so I read all these theories in books about how something becomes to be used as money, and I was pretty convinced by the theories in the books, and I thought that they were true. But then when I went to prison, I got to see the prison economy, and I got to see that sure enough, the theories in the books are true. And consumer goods like tobacco or top ramen soups or cans of fish wind up becoming money. And I got to see the entire prison economy where one guy would fix other people's radios, other people would polish people's boots, other people would do other people's laundries, and everybody would pay everybody in these prison money, which was mainly, three different ones. It was actually postage stamps, tobacco, top ramen soups, and then cans of fish. So 4 different things. But I got to see firsthand in action right before my eyes in a limited economy where you can kind of keep an eye on everything that's going on, that the theories in the books that I had read were true in reality as well. And then when Bitcoin came along, I knew people were going to start using it as money because it was useful as money. So I knew that was going to happen. So my business strategy was to buy up as many Bitcoins as I could early on and then build all the tools to make them even easier for people to actually start using as money. And in doing that, I get to set the entire world free at the same time as well. So I have my philosophical motivations and my business motivations are aligned. So what more motivation could you possibly need than having your philosophical and business interests be aligned so clearly? So I set out to make Bitcoin as useful as I possibly could in commerce. And I know the goal of this show isn't really to talk about the scaling debate, but
we'll get there. Don't worry, we're going to get there.
Okay. So I think a lot of the people they view Bitcoin only as a store of value don't realize that you won't use something as a store of value if it's not also useful in commerce. And if you destroy the usefulness in commerce, it's not useful as a store of value anymore either. And that's what I'm so upset about happening with Bitcoin right now. The usefulness of Bitcoin in commerce is being destroyed. And if that's successfully destroyed, Bitcoin's usefulness as a store of value will be destroyed as well.
So let's walk slowly through it if we could, because like I say, I think that we can talk about the scaling debate in a way that a 6-year-old can understand. I think we can do it if we're careful about it, and I think that even people who don't understand crypto, this might actually be the discussion that makes them open their eyes about the possibilities of this thing. Let's maybe start this way. What are the businesses that you could describe? What are the sort of portfolio? We've been showing some of the logos. What are the portfolio of businesses that you decided early on to invest in? And if you could, just for each of them briefly, tell us why you felt that they were important to this overall ecosystem that you're describing here.
Sure. So probably the most widely known one at this point is blockchain.info, which is the world's #1 Bitcoin wallet. It's responsible for more Bitcoin transactions than every single other Bitcoin wallet combined. And the reason I invested in that one is because it puts users in control of their own private keys. The wallet service provider, blockchain, doesn't hold anybody's money. It doesn't have the ability to freeze anybody's account. It doesn't have the ability to control anybody's funds in any way whatsoever. And granted, I made that investment 5.5 years ago, coming up on 6 years ago now. There's wallets that put users in even more control today than maybe that one. But at the time, it was definitely by far the easiest wallet for people to use with the most user, self-control over the wallet. So that was a no-brainer. I had the opportunity to invest in Coinbase at that time as well. Brian Armstrong, the founder, basically, said, Roger, please, please, please. And maybe I should have, but I had already invested in blockchain.info, and I really like blockchain.info's design better because blockchain.info allows the users to hold their own funds themselves. In fact, that's the only option with blockchain.info. You hold your money yourself. Whereas with Coinbase, they hold the Bitcoins for you. They operate just like a Bitcoin bank. So if at any point the IRS or the FBI or ATF go to Coinbase and say, give us Roger's Bitcoins, they'll have to comply or they'll get shut down. Whereas
and we might see that happen. We might see that
happen. And
there's
a really good chance we'll see that happen. Maybe it's already happened with specific accounts and they just weren't allowed to make it public and we don't know about it. In fact, I would be surprised if it hasn't already happened, to be honest. Whereas with blockchain.info, if those same agencies go to blockchain.info and say, give us Roger's Bitcoins, they'll say, sorry, we don't have the ability to do that. And all the wallet code, all the software, our client-side code is completely open source. So everybody that wants to and feels inclined to can verify the code to make sure that there aren't any backdoors in that as well. So that's a real difference in design philosophy. So one of the other ones that I invested in also was BitPay, which I believe is probably the biggest merchant processor in the entire world for Bitcoin transactions, which if you have a business and you want to start accepting Bitcoin, you probably need some help. You need some easy software to plug into your website. And most businesses that started accepting Bitcoin, they weren't philosophically on board with the grand vision. They didn't want to hold Bitcoin for the long term. They just wanted to be able to accept more payments from more people around the world without having to worry about chargebacks or credit card fraud or any of that sort of stuff. And Bitcoin with BitPay enables that. They've made, I think somewhere in the ballpark of 100,000 merchants are using using BitPay to accept Bitcoin. And so there's just, Kraken, of course, Kraken is one of the top Bitcoin exchanges in the entire world. I've been friends with the CEO of Kraken since we were teenagers. Kraken allows you to buy Bitcoin incredibly easy with your government-issued fiat currency. So if you're tired of dollars or euros or yen, you can send them over to Kraken and get your Bitcoins or a bunch of other cryptocurrencies at this point and start using that. So basically, I just tried to invest in all the different pieces of the ecosystem that make Bitcoin useful for people. And the one that people that come to Bitcoin more recently probably have never even heard of, but probably the one I'm the most proud of was bitcoinstore.com, that allowed people to buy more than 500,000 consumer electronics products for Bitcoin at prices that were as cheap or even cheaper than Amazon. And this was before there was any Newegg or Overstock or Tiger Direct or any of these other businesses that were accepting Bitcoin. There was basically, people selling homemade, knitted socks from alpaca wool and things like that. And this suddenly opened up an entire door of things. And we did over $4 million in sales our first year in Bitcoin, at a time when Bitcoins were like, in the single digits, and then in the teens. That was a pretty darn amazing amount of business that we were able to do, which kind of showed the world that it can be used in commerce, that, yeah, people can use it in business. And I did my best to point this out to companies like Newegg and Tiger Direct and Amazon on Twitter. I would post, screenshots of how quickly our sales were coming in. And I was telling them, hey, look at all these new customers that I'm getting because I accept Bitcoin. You guys should too. So I don't think bitcoinstore.com, I think it played a really major role in tipping all of these other merchants to start accepting Bitcoin around the world. And here we are today. And I guess a bigger question at this point is, what can't you buy with Bitcoin? Whereas in the early days was, what can you buy with Bitcoin? And Bitcoin Store was the answer to that. So you can buy any consumer electronics product you want. Its price is cheaper than Amazon.
So that leads me to my next point, because I think that this really does get to the key. If people start to understand this, I think that they can really better understand your position in this whole scaling debate. Can you expand a little bit on having been a merchant time and time again, having created tools for merchants, having been an advocate and an evangelist to other major merchants? Can you talk to us about what it is that merchants want from a cryptocurrency? You said some of them are not philosophically aligned. I think that's totally reasonable and totally fine. I don't think there's any of them that are philosophically aligned with Visa, but they take it. You know what I mean? Can you talk to us about what is it, because I think it's so missing from the understanding of the people on the other side of the debate. What is it that merchants are wanting? What is it that they want to see from a cryptocurrency, or what do they want it to provide in order for them to jump on board with both feet?
And one step before that also, I think it's worth pointing out that Bitcoin never would have become viewed as this store of value if people hadn't been using it in commerce first. If merchants weren't accepting it as payment, nobody would have even started having this notion at all that it could be used as a store of value. And so to answer your question about what do merchants want, they want payments that are irreversible and that are as close to instant as possible. They want the fees to be low, and they want the risk of chargebacks to be low as well. And they want the price to be as steady as possible. They don't like big price fluctuations. And Bitcoin's lost, a lot of those things. So in the early days, the rule on the Bitcoin network was first seen, first safe, which meant that once you broadcasted a Bitcoin transaction to the network, if that was the first one the network saw, that's the first one the miners were going to include in a block. And it became really, really, really difficult to double spend someone's transaction. Whereas a lot of these people on the other side of the scaling debate have been advocating for this thing called replaced by fee, which means I can pay you, and then before that transaction has been confirmed in a block, if I pay a bigger fee, I can send the Bitcoins to somebody else. Which means you're going to wait for who knows how long for it to get included in a block before you know that your payment's actually safe. That's kryptonite to merchant adoption. No merchant was going to want to accept those sorts of payments. Another thing are the fees. So last night, I was at a Bitcoin meetup, and some guy who was new to Bitcoin really wanted to buy some Bitcoin, so I agreed to sell him some. And the fee for me to send some Bitcoin from my phone to his was $8.50.
That sounds, yep, that's what it is right now.
$8.50 for one single Bitcoin transaction from my phone to his. And I asked him, I said, would you prefer Bitcoin Cash or something else? He's like, no, I need Bitcoin. And so he was brand new to Bitcoin. I suspect he'd only heard about Bitcoin a week or two earlier, and he saw the price going up like crazy. And so he didn't care about the fees at the moment. But for any merchant or anybody, that restaurant accepts Bitcoin. That was the first restaurant in all of Japan to start accepting Bitcoin. I'd wonder if anybody paid in Bitcoin at all tonight, because if you have to pay an extra $8.50 on top of your, couple dollars for a drink or a couple dollars for a food, or you can pay with a credit card and the fees are hidden from you at all, and the fees that the merchant pays is maybe 2.5% or 3% there. That's way less than the $8 on a $10 or $20 meal. People are going to stop using Bitcoin for commerce where $8 matters, and there's 1,001 other competitors to Bitcoin that would just love to take Bitcoin's market share on there. So merchants need fast, easy, secure, hard to double spend transactions, and all of those characteristics that make Bitcoin useful in commerce are being undermined right now, right before our eyes, and that's why we're seeing all the altcoins just skyrocket in value. And even Bitcoin.com now, it's September 1st here in Japan. Later today, we'll be doing our payroll and paying all the stuff for the end of the month. I think more than half of our employees have opted to be paid in Bitcoin Cash. And it looks like my video stopped. But,
we lost you. We've still got your audio. Audio. Let me see if I can work this thing around.
I think I can probably fix it for you.
Yeah? Okay. There we go. We got you back. Yeah. Fantastic. The technical workaround. So okay. I think that, would you say then that basically what you've presented is the fundamental core basis of your argument of what it is that you're arguing for in the scaling debate, is that it's fundamentally you want to be able to turn Bitcoin into a currency that meets all of those sort of qualifications as something that both merchants and consumers will want to use on a daily basis, and that's not happening. It's
dying right before our eyes.
So explain this then, because it's often we will present our own argument, but I do like to sort of present the strongest argument on the other side and then rip it apart. I don't necessarily think the other side's argument is all that strong, but as you understand it and as you've heard it so many times, I think people who are not involved in this debate hear what you have to say right now and they say, okay, yeah, that makes total sense. Why on earth would anybody disagree with what Roger just said? What is the argument for not doing the things that you just said?
So the argument on the other side is that if we allow Bitcoin to become so popular, it'll take a more expensive computer to run a full node. And right now there's somewhere in the ballpark of 100,000 full nodes around the world, and somewhere around the ballpark of like maybe 8,000 of those accept incoming connections as well, which is, if you're real deep into this, that's an important distinction. But for most people, it doesn't matter. Anyhow, their argument is that if it becomes too expensive to run one of these full nodes, that less people will run these full nodes, and then it'll be easy for government to come in and shut down all the full nodes. And if they shut down all the full nodes, that's the end of Bitcoin. And that's their argument, I think. But I don't have that fear at all. I think the best way to make Bitcoin resilient to government attacks is to get as many people around the world using it as possible. And even right now, you can literally run a Bitcoin full node on a $20 Raspberry Pi. Mm-hmm. If it winds up costing $20,000 for a server in some data center somewhere, but the entire world is using Bitcoin, guess what? There's going to be even more of these $20,000 computers around the world running Bitcoin full nodes. And all you need to do is find any one of them that's willing to relay your transaction to the network and include it in the block. So I'm not worried by their argument whatsoever. And some of them seem to have this weird distinction, thinking that every user should be running a full node themselves. And I don't share that view whatsoever. That seems like nonsense to me. Like you don't need to run a web server yourself to view websites or to even host a website. You don't need to run a SMTP server yourself to use email.
That's right.
You don't need to run a full node yourself in order to use Bitcoin.
Well, my question to you, and so I've been a software developer for 20 years, and I started developing with Bitcoin in about 2013, and I've done some point of sale stuff and whatnot. And I mean, I would love to see it be Bitcoin because I already have all of those libraries built myself. I've already developed the prototypes for Bitcoin. A lot of the other blockchains and protocols there's not as many libraries that are publicly available that work as well. So I would love it to be that. But one question that I ask all the time, and I'd love to ask you, is why is it important that it's Bitcoin?
It's not at all. And I only hear the other side. The other side of the scaling debate are the ones that always seem to say, why would anybody ever use Bitcoin? We don't have to worry about competition at all. Bitcoin is guaranteed to be the winner in the end. And from a philosophical point of view, it doesn't matter if it's Bitcoin. It can be Monero, it can be Zcash, it can be whatever. And I think the ones that provide the strongest competition to Bitcoin are the ones with the bigger privacy. And that's another point that's worth noting, is that these, the small blocks in the scaling argument, that's really, really undermined the fungibility of Bitcoin. Fungibility is just means that every piece of Bitcoin is the same as every other piece. Mm-hmm. These 1 megabyte blocks make it really, really easy to track what people are doing. The high fees make it so nobody's willing to use a mixer to add privacy. So it's undermining one of the characteristics that make Bitcoin money as well. So, but to answer your question, It doesn't have to be Bitcoin in the end. It doesn't matter if it's Bitcoin in the end. It doesn't make any difference whatsoever, other than it's like a big setback because, like you said, there's all these libraries and infrastructure have already been built around Bitcoin. So it's super easy for new people to, new software developers to get involved in Bitcoin because everything's already there. The tools are there ready to go. Now we have to build them all again on Monero or Zcash or Ethereum or take your pick. It's possible, but now we're losing, a couple years, head start that Bitcoin had. And Bitcoin previously had this light year head start over every other cryptocurrency, and it did seem impossible that anything else could catch up ever. But thanks to the high fees and full blocks and the horrible user experience that they provide, all these other cryptocurrencies are catching up really, really, really fast. And now, Bitcoin has, I haven't checked for a couple of days, but I think it's, south of 50% of the global market cap of cryptocurrencies. And it was at 90+% before the blocks became full, not very long ago at all. And I think that that's a direct result of people having a bad user experience with Bitcoin. Guess what? They're going to start using something else. And we're seeing that happen with Bitcoin.com. I think more than half of our bills that get paid here today for the end of the month are going to wind up being paid in Bitcoin Cash and not Bitcoin.
Okay, so let's start talking about that. First, if we could just briefly get out of the way what your proposed solution to faster confirmations, faster transactions. I'm trying to keep this as high level as we possibly can, right, without getting into the weeds. High level, fast transactions and low fees. It's not happening. It's not happening on Bitcoin. What's the solution? What needs to change?
The solution is already happening right before our eyes. People are going to switch to the currencies that give them fast transactions and low fees and with more privacy than Bitcoin provides. So that's why we've seen a lot of the privacy coins just skyrocket in value. And we've seen the amount of commerce being done on them skyrocket as well. So people are migrating from Bitcoin to these other coins. And the main thing that Bitcoin still has going for it is its huge network effect. It has all these libraries, all these users, all this name recognition. You can go to somebody on the street now and say, have you heard of Bitcoin? And probably 5 times out of 7, the person's going to say, yeah, sure, I've heard of Bitcoin. If you ask them, have you heard of Ethereum or have you heard of Dash or Monero? They'll say, no, what's that? Right. So Bitcoin had this huge head start, but it's being undermined and people are switching to using things other than Bitcoin. So what's the answer? The answer is the same as always in any thing, not just cryptocurrencies, but when it comes to, coffee or Coca-Cola or apartments or cars, people are going to buy and use whatever gives them the best bang for their buck. And if, using Bitcoin costs $9 a transaction and using, Dash or Zcash or Ethereum or whatever else costs a couple of pennies and provides about the same level of user experience, people are going to start using those other ones. And that's what's happening. So the answer, if we want to rescue Bitcoin and for Bitcoin holders that would love to see Bitcoin be the winner in the end, we need to make Bitcoin give it the very best user experience we possibly can, which means fast transactions and low fees and the greatest amount of privacy we can. And the current Blockstream and core developers openly advocate for the exact opposite. They openly say that they want high fees. They don't make it a secret at all. When people hear that, they think, I must be lying about that. Who in their right mind would want high fees? But no, go out there and I put together a YouTube video about it with a bunch of their own quotes. They openly say they want the fees to be high. Many of them say they want the fees for one single Bitcoin transaction to be $100 or even $1,000. Well, I have news for you. If Bitcoin transactions cost $1,000, nobody's going to use it. The fees will never get that high. People will migrate to things other than Bitcoin long before the fees get to be $1,000 per transaction. So these people want the exact opposite thing of what makes Bitcoin useful in commerce. And it's the fact that Bitcoin is useful in commerce that enables Bitcoin to even be considered as a store of value or digital gold or whatever this perceptions that these people have. If Bitcoin isn't useful in commerce, it's not useful for any of this other store of value stuff either. It has to be both or it will be neither.
So let's talk about, we spoke a little bit about the altcoins, as it were, but there's also this other phenomenon of the forks. And as we saw with Bitcoin Cash, that's coming along. Is there a solution within the realm of forking? Could this situation, first, let's talk about, is Bitcoin Cash, is that particular fork, does it have the potential to solve any of the issues that we're talking about? And then second, is that model of forking and potentially getting a spin-off that has some of these other aspects to it, do you think that that's a viable or even possible or plausible solution to the problem?
And it pretty clearly works. Bitcoin Cash is what, four weeks old now,
Mm-hmm.
and it's the third biggest cryptocurrency in the entire world. So that was, I don't think anybody can argue that that wasn't an amazing, incredible success. And we've seen almost all the exchanges have already integrated Bitcoin Cash. Most of the wallets have already announced that they're integrating Bitcoin Cash. Some of them have already finished that integration. Over on Bitcoin.com, our wallet has Bitcoin Cash available in the beta version right now. We'll be releasing the version to the public here for everybody as soon as Apple approves it in the Apple Store. But anyhow, the adoption takes time, but how far it's come in 4 weeks is pretty amazing. But I think my real prediction, if Bitcoin Cash usurps, Bitcoin 1x, or I'm sorry, SegWit 1x or SegWit 2x versions of Bitcoin, I think the real winners are going to be altcoins in that scenario, because people, and at the end of the day, I guess that's smart too. Like you can't get emotionally attached to a currency. You need to use whichever currency is the one that works the best for you and whatever goals you're trying to accomplish. And if that's not Bitcoin, you should use something other than Bitcoin, is the fact of the matter. I would love it to be Bitcoin. I poured 7 years of my heart and soul into it at this point, but it's not guaranteed to be Bitcoin in the end. A couple of years ago, I thought it was almost certain that it would be Bitcoin. But wow, these economic ignoramuses from Blockstream and Core have really undermined Bitcoin's usefulness as money. And I'm sure some of them are smart programmers and smart cryptographers, but if you don't understand what makes something money, and you undermine the characteristics of Bitcoin that make Bitcoin money, people are going to stop using it as money. And that's what we're seeing happen right before our eyes. And people are starting to use the monetary competitors to Bitcoin. And that's why, Dash and Monero and Zcash and Ethereum, of course, and, a whole bunch of others are just exploding in popularity and value, is because they're providing a better user experience than Bitcoin for people at this point.
I'll tell you anecdotally, I recently released a book and decided to only sell it for cryptocurrency, not to put it up on Amazon as I've done my others. And I will tell you that a minority of the transactions that are coming in to buy this book and to buy the audiobook are Bitcoin. As a matter of fact, today I was shocked. I had my first Zcash one come in, and I was like, wow, people are actually using Zcash to buy goods. So I'm taking about 10 of them, you know what I mean? So I'm actually getting a chance to see. It's shocking me how much, even over the last 2 months, that the amount of Bitcoin that's come in has gone down. To your point, I want to shift gears a little bit. You being there in Japan and us talking about people actually using cryptocurrency. Japan sort of making... Did they make all cryptocurrency legal tender, or was it just specific ones? Was it just Bitcoin?
So it's not just Bitcoin, but
okay.
You have to get permission from the government for that specific cryptocurrency.
Okay, so let's talk about
there's a government
that.
list of approved currencies here.
Okay, so let's talk about this potential roadmap for the adoption of Bitcoin. I'm interested or the adoption of cryptocurrency in general as a currency. I'm interested to hear your thoughts. Both as someone who lives in Japan and as an anarchist as well. Do you think that, and this is for the statist libertarians who are watching, do you think that moving in the legal realm to try to make Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies legal tender is something that we as libertarians should even be pursuing? Is that even a path that makes any sense to go the Japan route? Or is that actually shooting ourselves in the foot when it comes to the real power of cryptocurrency?
So there's I guess two answers to that question.
Okay.
So philosophically, you shouldn't need permission from a bunch of strangers to use whatever cryptocurrency you want. Like of course not. Why should I need their permission any more than they should need permission from me? So if I started sending letters to people in the mail saying they need my permission to use a particular cryptocurrency because some other people and I got together and wrote down words on a piece of paper and called it a law, in our little group, they'd think I'm a nutcase. And if I started threatening them that if they don't obey my telling them that they have to get permission from me, and I'll lock them in a cage if they don't, they would think I'm a psychopath and a violent individual that should be locked away from the rest of society. But when those people calling themselves government do the exact same thing, send threatening letters to people in the mail and say, if you don't obey us and get permission from us, we're going to hurt you, people just say, oh, it's government. Of course we have to obey them. So philosophically, of course, that's all a bunch of nonsense, and nobody should have to get permission from anybody else to do anything that's peaceful. One fantastic libertarian book, if I can recommend, that
Please.
I read when I was a teenager that I don't think gets enough attention is a book by, I think it was Leonard Reed, and it's called Anything That's Peaceful. And I think he wrote it in the 50s, and basically he just lays out a case, in the 50s is pretty early. He laid out a case for just, let anybody do anything that's peaceful, and think how much simpler and better our world would be if anybody was allowed to do anything that's peaceful. And so anyhow, I really thought that was a great book, and I think most libertarians maybe haven't heard of that book. It was written, I'm pretty sure it was written by Leonard Reed, the same guy that wrote the essay I Pencil for anybody.
Oh yes, that's fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah, so and it's been like 25 years since I read it, so I'm almost positive that's who the author is. But anyhow, great. It was a great book. Anything That's Peaceful was the name of it. But so, should we lobby governments and ask them for permission to use cryptocurrencies? In the real world that we live in, the fact of the matter is those crazy violent people calling themselves the state will use violence against us if we don't get their permission. And so philosophically, no, we shouldn't need their permission at all whatsoever. But in the real world, if you want to have a business and customers and serve people and be able to operate for more than a couple of days until they figure out that you're operating without their permission, you have to jump through their hoops. You have to get the business's licenses. You have to pay the taxes. You have to do all of those things, or these crazy psychopaths will hurt you for not having gotten their permission. So, I run a pretty big business, but I have to jump through all those hoops as well myself. Not because I agree with them, but because these people will hurt me if I don't. So they don't have my moral acceptance whatsoever, but from a practical standpoint, I have to do what the violent people say. But I want to point out that, hey, those are violent people that are threatening peaceful people with violence. And if you think threatening peaceful people with violence isn't okay, don't think that those people are okay. And I imagine a lot of your viewers have already seen it, but if this sounds like a little bit of an alien idea to you, go and watch a video on YouTube. It's only 4 minutes long. It's called George Ought to Help.
Yes.
And it's a fantastic video, and in 4 minutes you can see so incredibly clearly how everything that government does is backed up by the threat of violence, even if you don't see it or realize it right off the bat it is. So it's called George Ought to Help. It's 4 minutes on YouTube. Fantastic video.
So I want to ask you, now that we've kind of gone through your history, with where we are at today, with Bitcoin specifically, but cryptocurrency in general, if you look back at your first sort of realization that this is going to be something that you're going to dedicate a significant amount of time and energy and resources to, back to that beginning, has the trajectory for you been what you imagined at the time? Has it been less? Where are we in terms of, has it exceeded your expectations? I'm very interested to know that.
We were right on track, and never, ever, ever in my wildest dreams did I think that Bitcoin would be choked and stifled by a bunch of people who claim to be Bitcoin fans. And by my biggest fear is that governments would see the writing on the wall that this is going to undermine their ability to control money, and they would make Bitcoin illegal, back right from day one once they realized what was going on. And that would make it, really, really difficult for it to gain worldwide adoption. So my goal was to get as many people using Bitcoin as quickly as I possibly could. And I really, really, I think did an amazing job of that, and really succeeded beyond, what it seems like, would be possible out of anything other than like a science fiction novel. And then once Bitcoin really started to get mainstream adoption and traction, and a bunch of people came along and said, no, we need to limit the number of people that can use Bitcoin on chain, and we're going to limit the blocks to 1 megabyte. And if you don't like it, piss off, is basically what they said. And wow, like what a twist in the science fiction novel that is Bitcoin, that it was going on this amazing path, and then a bunch of people that weren't part of the government that claimed they liked Bitcoin diverted Bitcoin and undermined Bitcoin's usefulness as money, causing it to probably not be the cryptocurrency that wins in the end. If I had to guess at this point, I would guess that it's probably less likely than not that Bitcoin is going to be the cryptocurrency that wins in the end. And it breaks my heart to say that, because it had, just light years head start over everything else. And then these people like, I'll name names: Adam Back, Greg Maxwell, Peter Todd, Eric Lombroso, Luke Jr. I'm sure they're smart programmers. They have no clue why Bitcoin is useful as money, and they've intentionally undermined Bitcoin's usefulness as money. and they've opened the door wide open for people to start wanting to use things other than Bitcoin in commerce. And if people start using things other than Bitcoin in commerce, that's the end of Bitcoin being used as the store of value as well, or the one chain to rule them all. And we're seeing that happen right before our eyes. So I appreciate where your guys' heart is at for the most part to those guys, but man, you guys have destroyed Bitcoin. Sorry, that's the truth.
It's a bit of a tragic tale, but I think that what you have been predicting has come to fruition. And certainly you've been predicting this and investing your heart into Bitcoin and into cryptocurrency. The story's obviously not quite done yet, and the work that you've put in it's really not done, because I think cryptocurrency is where it's going to be, right? And so I hope that regardless of what happens with Bitcoin, that you will stick around, because I know that your guidance is going to be needed in this community for a very, very long time to come. No one has the wisdom that you have just from having actually done it. If you have anything to say to people just getting involved right now, particularly I like to call them Bitcoin bros, because I'm seeing a lot of people in my Facebook feed who are my old time friends and stuff, who it's just like every single bad decision that they could make economically, these guys in their personal life, these guys are taking out bank loans and buying Bitcoin at weird price points and the whole nine. If you could say anything to people entering into the world of cryptocurrency right now, from either side, just from your experience, your own wisdom of something that they could take with them to help them along in this journey, what would you say to them?
So I guess kind of the same advice applies to investing everywhere. So don't put all your eggs in one basket. And when choosing which crypto coins to buy the ones that provide the most usefulness to people. So you need a limited supply, and anything needs to have value is scarcity and usefulness. If something's useful and scarce, it's going to have a price. And so look at these different cryptocurrencies, make sure you're buying ones that are scarce, and then buy the ones that are the most useful. And if Bitcoin's not the most useful one, and at $9 a transaction, I don't think it is, and with really incredibly weak privacy because of these 1 megabyte blocks and high fees, I don't think that's useful either. You don't want everybody to be able to spy on what you're doing financially. I think you should probably be buying coins other than Bitcoin, and I think we'll see those take off. And as the owner of Bitcoin.com and the person who basically helped kick off the entire Bitcoin ecosystem, arguably more than anybody else in the world, it breaks my heart to say that, but that's the truth. The truth is more important than what my feelings are. Wow.
Well, Roger Ver, I thank you for doing this interview, and I truly admire your genuine take on this whole situation. Like I say, you're an important figure, and I think that can sometimes in these sorts of debates, and certainly with the scaling debate sort of civil war, I know that might be lost, but there's a lot of us out here who have looked to your thoughts and your wisdom and will continue to do so. So Roger Ver, thank you very much for being on the show, and hopefully we can have you back on again when the boat has sort of righted itself, and we can have a positive talk about how things turned out great.
I would love to do that.
All right. Thanks so much, Roger.
Thanks.
So, pretty shocking.
Yeah, what a great interview.
Pretty shocking revelation. I did not think.
Yeah.
I was actually shocked when the CEO of Bitcoin.com, who's been the world's biggest Bitcoin booster, says it's actually more likely that it's not going to be Bitcoin, and tells people that if Bitcoin stays like it is, don't buy Bitcoin. Like
crazy.
He may be one of the top holders of the asset.
Right.
Like, to me, that's a very genuine position to hold. Like, when you see somebody whose own self-interest would be most served by saying, buy Bitcoin, buy Bitcoin, buy Bitcoin. And he's like, I don't know if I can really say buy Bitcoin. So I thank him for the candidness. That's crazy,
and
bro.
It's an open fucking market for the altcoins right now.
Well, dude, I had this discussion with one of the editors at Activist Post yesterday, day before yesterday, where I was saying that it's constant now that there's people, every time I say something about Bitcoin, there's the Bitcoin bros, you know what I mean? Who, here's the interesting part about it. What do we know about Roger's background? Now, Roger's not a developer, but he said that, this whole thing, his whole life was changed by an obsession with economics and an understanding of economics, right? And so for me, I'm both a software developer and as a developer, I've done a lot of e-commerce stuff. I've done a lot of things in terms of tracking demographics. I mean, I've got a patent that's ad insertion and tracking. So it's like understanding human action. And then in later years, really getting into economics, and particularly now Austrian economics, getting into all of that is like, what I see is that there are a whole bunch of people involved in this debate who either, you got to know one of two things, right? And preferably you'd want to know both when it comes to cryptocurrency if you're really going to invest in it. You don't have to, though, because there's no barrier to entry, right? Just like you could go and fucking blow your money as a day trader on Forex or buy penny stocks or whatever. People do it all the time. But economics and software, because that's what it is. That's what cryptocurrency is, right? So for me, And I was, like I say, I was having this discussion where it occurred to me that when I talk about I have no faith in Bitcoin, what I'm, and I talked about it a little bit there, is that it's like and one of the reasons why I haven't been so hot, why I've put a lot of my development stuff on hold, is that I'm really actually scared to sit down and devote hundreds or thousands of hours to coding something where Bitcoin is the cryptocurrency that I'm using on like a point of sale system. Because I'm like, oh, well, if by the time I'm able to get this to market, which might be a year, which might be 2 years, Bitcoin is irrelevant, or the fees are super high that nobody would use it, I'm going to have to go back and recode with a whole different cryptocurrency. So it's like, people are like, you're hating on Bitcoin, you're doing this. I'm like, dude, I've got all this shit sitting lined up that works with Bitcoin that I've been developing since 2013. When I started developing the Bitcoin with the Bitcoin libraries that I have, I could send transactions for under a penny. I could get transactions confirmed with no miner fee, 0 miner fee.
Wow.
Like not even a Satoshi, 0. Sure, I'd have to wait. Sure, I'd have to wait a long ass fucking time. But as he says, it was first see, first save. So it was like, fine, it's sitting there. If I've got an internal system, I'll wait on the confirmation. No problem. I can use it for a lot of different things. Right? And this was before Ethereum. So it's, I was thinking a lot of the same, obviously not at the same high level as Vitalik, but it's like thinking like, oh, maybe I could use micropayments to trigger shit and do this. And, and I was working on Arduino stuff at the same time and all of that. But it's like, this is what I'm talking about when I'm like, I have no confidence. It's not a matter of I'm going to go and I'm going to buy something and I'm going to hope that a week from now or a month from now or a year from now that it's going to go up in price. Fuck that.
Yeah, it's stupid.
Fuck that. I don't care because I'm an entrepreneur. I'm trying to build a business with this thing. I don't want to go and spend 1,000 hours of coding and then have to throw it away. That's what I have no confidence in. And that's what Roger's talking about. And that's what a huge amount of people who want to get involved in the scaling debate because it's fucking cool, because they're Bitcoin bros, because they're like, yeah, man, to the moon, to the moon, to the moon. And it's like, there's a reason why indigenous tribes, a lot of traditions, traditional cultures, even not indigenous, but often religious communities, they have an ideal where it's like, any major decision that you're going to make, especially financial decisions, think 3 generations into the future.
That's cool.
Right? Think not just how it will affect your children or your children's children, but think how it will affect the children that there's no way that you could even help if you wanted to, because you'll be dead. It's about time scales. And the interesting thing about it, if you think about that idea, something becomes self-evident. If you want to have good long-term results, and you don't think in the long term, you only think here, your chances of actually having good long-term results are infinitesimally less than if every financial decision you make is with a long time horizon.
Right.
And that's the problem with the idea of corporations. What's the big problem that everybody has with corporate America? Corporate CEOs make bad decisions. There's all this exploitation. They're polluting the water. They're doing this. Why? Because they only think a quarter ahead. Their time scale is 1 quarter, 3 months. Because if they don't nail their number, the number that's predicted for them, for their stocks and their earnings in that next quarter, that CEO could be fired. So why think 5 years in advance? And that's how you get the fuck up that it is. That's the corruption. And that's what our society is, and we're seeing it play out in a realm where there's no barrier to entry. But here's somebody who's been at it for a long time, who was thinking long term. Because why? Because his end goal was not to make money.
Yeah, it was to
make the world more free. And
power.
And, with some very good reasons to want to to fight back a little bit against a government who had wrongly imprisoned him. When you look at someone's motivation like that, it's worth taking a listen. So I really thank Roger for that. Thank Adam too. What do we got? Are we done?
Close to it.
Close to it? Well, it's starting to get hot for some reason in here.
Yeah.
I don't know if you're feeling it.
Yeah, I'm feeling it.
I'm feeling it. So I'll say goodbye to the people and wipe my forehead. Well, thank you for joining us today. I want to thank Roger Vera for coming on. What a great interview. And of course, thanks to Adam Kokesh. You guys go and check him out at thefreedomline.com. He's going to be heading back East Coast, and then it sounds like down around the South. So if you're in any of those areas, I suggest that you go out, meet and greet. He's a great guy. Go meet him in person. And not only that, not only are you going to get to meet Adam, but what's cool is that you'll get to meet like-minded people who are in your area. So it's an opportunity for you to go and actually meet some people who are next to you. And believe me, that makes a huge, huge difference. So just another reminder, I'll be up in New Hampshire at the Free Coast Festival, festival.freecoast.org. That's going to be the 8th through the 10th. If you are in the New Hampshire area, come on up and you can meet me and even more like-minded people and people associated with the Free State Project up there. Looking forward to that. And we will be back again next week. So if you want to check us out on podcast, those archives are available, iTunes and Stitcher. And of course, you can go to vinarmani.com to see all of our archives, both full shows and the show segments. We'll have both of these interviews up as their own separate and shareable pieces. So until next week, stay free.